They left her to freeze in the snow until the Alpha King found his mate among the dead. In the heart of this frozen wilderness, a lone figure stumbled, her limbs numb and her breath visible in the icy air. Ilara, a young woman from a proud clan, had been left here to die. Her own people had betrayed her, abandoning her to the cruelty of winter, convinced that survival was impossible. Her boots were soaked, her cloak torn, and her body shaking uncontrollably. Yet her mind refused to surrender. "I will not die here," she whispered to herself, her teeth chattering with the effort. Every step was agony. Every gust of wind threatened to knock her off her feet. But something inside her, some stubborn spark of defiance, kept her moving forward. Memories of her home, now burned to the ground by her traitorous clan, haunted her. Faces she trusted, now twisted in betrayal. She had given everything for her people, and they had left her to the cold as though she were already dead. Tears threatened to fall, but she forced them back. Crying would not save her. Only movement, only struggle, only sheer will could keep her alive. Hours passed. The snow thickened. Her vision blurred. The mountains around her seemed endless, a frozen labyrinth with no exit. Each step became heavier than the last, her body screaming for rest, for warmth. And then, just as darkness began to creep into her mind, she saw it, a shadow moving through the blizzard. A figure taller and wider than any human she had ever seen, moving with an almost unnatural grace. Kale, the Alpha King, had arrived. His presence was commanding even in the blinding snow. Wolves followed him silently, their eyes gleaming like fire against the white landscape. He had been drawn to her not by chance but by the whisper of fate itself. He saw something in her, a spark that had survived betrayal, a fire that even the cold could not extinguish. He approached, his steps deliberate and calm, and knelt beside her. "You are alive," he said, his voice low and powerful, carrying over the wind. There was no accusation in his tone, no judgment, only recognition, as though he knew she was meant for something greater than the cruel fate her clan had tried to impose. Ilara looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear and awe. Who are you?" she managed to whisper, her lips blue from the cold. "I am Kale," he replied, "and you, survivor, are not meant to die here." Before she could respond, he scooped her into his massive arms, lifting her effortlessly. Her body was stiff and unresponsive, but the warmth radiating from him seeped into her frozen bones. She felt, for the first time in hours, a sense of relief, a fragile, trembling hope. The journey to Kale's fortress was perilous. Snow whipped against their faces, and hidden cliffs threatened to send them plunging into icy death. But Kale moved with confidence, leading her through paths only he seemed to know. Wolves flanked them, silent guardians in the storm. Ilara, barely conscious, felt the weight of her situation, the thin line between life and death, and the strange bond forming between her and this mysterious Alpha. At last they reached the fortress, a towering structure of ice and stone that seemed to grow from the mountain itself. It was beautiful and terrifying, with spires reaching into the stormy sky and windows glowing with warm light. Kale carried her inside, placing her gently on a bed of furs near a roaring fire. For the first time since her betrayal, she felt the warmth of life rather than the cold of death. As Ilara regained consciousness, she took in her surroundings. The fortress was unlike anything she had seen. Walls of crystal-clear ice reflected the firelight, creating a dance of shadows. Ancient tapestries hung in every corridor, telling stories of Alpha's past, of battles won and lost, of strength and sacrifice. She could sense the power in every stone, every shadow, every breath of wind that slipped through the halls. Kale sat beside her, watching silently. He was a man of imposing presence, broad-shouldered, with eyes like storm clouds and a calmness that demanded respect. Yet beneath his strength she sensed a loneliness, a weight of responsibility that mirrored her own despair. He had seen death countless times, faced betrayal and battle, yet even he was moved by the sight of her, the survivor, left for dead. "You should rest," he said, his voice gentle now. "The storm is not your enemy anymore. You are safe here." Alara tried to speak, but her voice was weak. Instead, she simply nodded, letting the warmth of the fire and the presence of Kale seep into her bones. Sleep came quickly, unbidden, as exhaustion claimed her body. When she awoke, the storm outside had lessened, but the chill remained in the air. She was wrapped in thick furs, her hands no longer numb, her body slowly regaining strength. Kale was still there, standing at the edge of the firelight, watching her. "You survived," he said, almost more to himself than to her. "And that is no small feat. Few could endure what you have." Alara met his gaze, feeling both fear and a strange curiosity. Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice still weak but firmer than before. Kale's eyes darkened, filled with a mix of admiration and something harder to define. "Because you were not meant to die alone in the snow. There is something about you, a strength, a fire that the world needs." She looked down, unsure of how to respond. She had survived betrayal, the freezing cold, and almost certain death, but she had never imagined that her life would be saved by the legendary Alpha King himself. Part of her felt fear, part of her felt relief, and part of her felt a flicker of something else, an unspoken connection that neither of them fully understood yet. Over the next days, Kale taught her the ways of his fortress. She learned the paths through the icy mountains, the ways to move silently with the wolves, and the history of his bloodline, a line of alphas who had ruled not just by power, but by destiny. Alara discovered that her survival was no accident. Her family had been tied to Kale's ancestors, and her leaving her clan's betrayal had set a prophecy into motion. Yet despite the lessons and the warmth of the fortress, Alara could not ignore the shadow of fear that clung to her. She had been betrayed once. How could she trust even someone as powerful and enigmatic as Kale? And Kale himself seemed restless, haunted by visions of the curse that ran through his lineage, a curse that could be awakened only by someone as strong-willed as Alara. One evening, as the wind howled outside and the fire crackled softly, Alara wandered to a frozen window. She stared out at the mountains, the snow stretching endlessly. "I don't belong here," she whispered to herself. "I am not one of them. I am not meant to survive this world." Kale's voice came from behind her, low and steady. "Survival is not about belonging, Alara. It is about endurance. And you have endured what no one else could." She turned to him, surprised by the intensity in his gaze. "Endured or just barely alive?" she asked softly. He took a step closer, and she felt the warmth radiating from him even through the thick furs. "You are alive, yes, but more than that, you are ready. Ready for the path destiny has chosen for you. And for the first time in many years, I see a light in you that even I could not extinguish." Alara felt a shiver run down her spine, not from the cold, but from something deeper, something stirring within her heart. She did not yet understand it, could not yet name it, but the connection was undeniable. And yet fear lingered. Could she trust destiny? Could she trust Kale? Could she trust herself? The night deepened and the wind outside grew louder. Alara sat by the fire, staring into its flames, feeling the weight of the snow, the betrayal, and the mysterious path that had led her here. And then, faintly, she saw it, a mark glowing softly on her skin, visible only in the flickering firelight. Kale knelt beside her, eyes wide in shock and awe. "The gods, they did not abandon you," he whispered, placing a hand over the mark. "Because you were meant for me." Alara gasped, heart pounding. Her life, her betrayal, her survival, all of it had led to this moment. She looked at Kale, and for the first time she felt the weight of destiny pressing against her chest. A storm had passed, but another was rising, one of power, of connection, of challenges neither of them could yet imagine. And in the quiet of the fortress, with snow still falling outside and the fire casting shadows across their faces, Alara understood that her life had changed forever. She was alive, but her journey and her fate had only just begun. The fire's warmth lingered on her skin, but Alara could not shake the weight of what Kale had told her. She traced the faintly glowing mark on her arm with trembling fingers. Destined for him. The words echoed in her mind, mingling with disbelief, fear, and something she could not yet name. The fortress felt larger now, more alive and more dangerous. Every shadow seemed to whisper secrets, and the snow outside raged like the unanswered questions in her heart. Kale watched her from across the room, his expression unreadable. The Alpha King had spent centuries learning the language of power, control, and survival. Yet in his eyes, a rare flicker of vulnerability appeared as he observed her. He did not speak, waiting for her to gather herself, understanding that the truths of destiny were sometimes too heavy for sudden delivery. Alara finally spoke, voice soft and hesitant. "Why me? Why now? I survived, but I am nothing, just someone left for dead." Kale's gaze softened, yet it remained commanding. "Nothing. You survived what none else could. You walked through death and came out breathing. That is strength, Alara. That is fire. That is why the curse within me recognizes you." Alara shivered, not from the cold but from the intensity in his words. She wanted to protest, to argue that survival did not make her special, but the truth burned inside her chest. She had endured betrayal, snow, and loneliness. Yet now something entirely new, something terrifying stirred within her. She was not just surviving, she was awakening. Kale stood and moved to the large windows, staring into the snowstorm outside. The Alpha's fortress, carved into the mountain itself, had stood for centuries, enduring countless winters and wars. Now, it seemed, it awaited the arrival of its destined mate. Kale's mind wandered to the centuries of curses and battles that had marked his lineage. For generations, the Alpha bloodline had been haunted, their strength intertwined with a power that only the true mate could awaken. "Do you know what this means?" Kale asked without turning. "You are not merely my mate in legend. The curse that has shadowed my family, it stirs because of you. If it awakens fully, it could bring ruin or redemption, depending on whether you embrace your role or resist it." Alara's heart pounded. "And if I refuse?" she whispered, almost too softly for even the storm to hear. Kale finally turned, eyes dark and stormy. "Refusal is not your choice. Fate has carved this path for us. The question is only whether you walk it willingly or stumble blindly." The words sent a chill through her, deeper than the snow ever had. She was not merely living. She was bound to a destiny she did not understand. Yet in the same moment, there was something alluring in Kale's presence, a promise that even in darkness, she would not walk alone. Over the following days, Kale began to teach Alara the ways of his fortress, the paths through the mountains, and the rituals of his pack. She learned to move silently through snow-laden forests, to read the subtle signs of the land, and to understand the wolves that followed him like shadows. Every lesson was filled with tension, sometimes of fear, sometimes of desire. Every encounter with Kale left her heart racing, whether from the intensity of his gaze or the raw power that seemed to radiate from him like heat from a fire. At first, Alara resisted, clinging to her independence. "I am not yours," she said one morning as they trained in the courtyard, her breath visible in the frosty air. "I survived betrayal and I survived death. I will not be commanded by anyone, even an Alpha King." Kale's expression softened, but his voice remained firm. "I do not command you, Alara. I guide you. You survived because you fought alone. Now you must fight with me and understand the power that binds us." Their relationship became a delicate dance of power and trust. Alara's defiance irritated Kale, but also drew him closer. He admired her courage, her stubbornness, and her refusal to submit to fear. And yet, beneath the tension, a connection deepened, a bond neither of them could fully explain. Every shared glance, every word spoken in quiet moments by the fire, carried an unspoken weight. One evening, Kale brought her to the Hall of Ancestors, a chamber deep within the fortress. Ancient portraits of alphas long gone lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow her every movement. Kale's voice was solemn as he spoke. "You are part of this legacy now," he said. "Your family was tied to mine long ago. The betrayal that left you in the snow, it was part of a chain meant to awaken the power between us. Do you understand?" Elara shook her head, her emotions tangled. "I survived the snow, I fought for my life. And now I am caught in a war I never wanted. How am I supposed to understand this?" Kale stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You are not supposed to understand yet. You are supposed to feel. Feel the bond that is forming, the power that stirs, the destiny that the storm outside raged with relentless fury. Yet inside Kale's fortress, a tense calm settled. Snow lashed against the frozen walls, howling through the mountain passes, but within the fortress, firelight flickered across stone and ice. Elara stood near the window, her breath fogging the glass as she stared at the endless white world beyond. The mark on her arm, once faint, now glowed softly, pulsing with a rhythm that matched her own heartbeat. Kale approached silently, his presence commanding yet gentle. "The storm mirrors what is happening within you," he said, voice low and steady. "The curse stirs. The bond between us strengthens, and soon we will face the trials that destiny has prepared." Elara turned to him, uncertainty shadowing her eyes. "And if I fail, what if I am not strong enough?" Kale reached out, his hand brushing hers. "You are stronger than you know. You have survived betrayal, freezing cold, and the emptiness of being abandoned. That strength is not gone, it lives within you. Together, we will face the darkness and triumph." The fortress doors opened suddenly, and a cold wind carried with it whispers of danger. From the snowstorm outside, figures moved like shadows, warriors from rival clans, drawn by old grudges and a desire to claim the Alpha's power. Elara's pulse quickened. She realized that her survival was not yet complete. She and Kale were about to face their first true test together. Kale's eyes darkened with resolve. "Stay close," he commanded, and the wolves of the pack appeared at his side, their growls low and threatening. The intruders stepped onto the frozen courtyard, unaware that they were entering the territory of a king whose power was unmatched and whose mate had been chosen by fate itself. Elara felt a mixture of fear and determination. She was no longer the abandoned girl in the snow. She had learned to move, to fight, and to sense the land and the supernatural forces around her. She met Kale's gaze, and in that moment an unspoken understanding passed between them. They would stand together, no matter the cost. The battle was swift and precise. Kale moved with a deadly grace, his strength amplified by the connection to his mate. The wolves leapt and snarled, their teeth glinting like silver in the firelight. Elara followed Kale's lead, her movements sure and confident. She could feel the pulse of power from the mark on her arm, guiding her, strengthening her. Each strike she made, each step she took, was part of a dance that blended skill, instinct, and destiny. When the last of the intruders fell, silence returned to the fortress. Snow continued to swirl outside, but inside a new warmth had settled. Elara breathed heavily, adrenaline still coursing through her veins, and Kale placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "You see now," he said softly, "your strength is more than survival. It is power. It is destiny, and it is ours." Elara nodded, still catching her breath, the reality of what they had endured settling in. She had faced death in the snow, betrayal by those she loved, and now the threat of war. And through it all, she had not faltered. She had become something greater, something stronger, something worthy of standing beside Kale. The days that followed were filled with preparation and learning. Kale introduced her to the ancient rites of the Alpha lineage, teaching her how to harness the bond that tied them together. Elara discovered that her courage and resilience were keys not just to survival, but to breaking the curse that had haunted Kale's family for generations. The glowing mark on her arm became a symbol of hope, a guide that would lead them through the darkest nights. But with every lesson, every moment of closeness, the tension between them grew. Elara found herself drawn to Kale in ways she could not explain. His strength, his wisdom, his unwavering presence, each stirred something deep within her, a longing that was both thrilling and terrifying. Kale, too, felt the pull of the bond, a mixture of desire, respect, and the need to protect. Their connection was no longer just about fate. It was about trust, about vulnerability, about the power of two hearts aligned against the darkness. One night, as snow fell silently over the fortress, Elara and Kale stood together on the highest balcony, overlooking the mountains. The wind had softened, but the cold remained sharp, biting at their skin. Kale's hand found hers, fingers entwining naturally, as if the bond had always been there. "You have changed everything," Kale said, voice barely above a whisper. "Without you, I would still be chained by the curse, trapped by the weight of my own power. But you have given me hope and a future I never imagined possible." Elara turned to him, her heart aching with the depth of her feelings. "I was afraid," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Afraid of being abandoned again, afraid of failing. But with you, I feel like I am not alone, like I can finally fight for something more than just survival." Kale's gaze softened, and for the first time he allowed himself a full smile. "You are not alone, Elara, and you never will be. Together we can face anything, even the curse that threatens to destroy everything I hold dear." Their moment was interrupted by a distant roar, echoing through the mountains. The ground trembled slightly, and the snow outside seemed to shift unnaturally. Kale's expression hardened and he drew his sword, the silver blade gleaming in the moonlight. "The curse, it stirs," he murmured, more to himself than to her, "and we must face it now." Elara felt a shiver run through her, not from fear, but from the realization that their journey was far from over. She had survived the snow, learned to trust Kale, and embraced the bond that tied them together. But the true test, the battle against the forces of the curse, was only beginning. They descended to the heart of the fortress, where the ancient chamber of the Alphas awaited. The walls were carved with runes and symbols that pulsed faintly with a silver light. The wolves gathered around them, forming a protective circle, their eyes glowing with intelligence and loyalty. Kale placed his hand on the mark on Elara's arm, closing his eyes as he drew power from the bond. "Together," he whispered, "together we can end this." Elara felt the energy surge through her, the warmth of the fire and the cold of the snow outside blending within her. She understood now that the curse was not just a force of destruction, but a challenge, one that required courage, trust, and unity. And for the first time she did not feel fear. She felt strength. She felt purpose. She felt love. The chamber shook as shadows emerged from the walls, the remnants of the curse taking form. They were creatures of darkness, twisted and terrifying, yet Kale and Elara stood firm. The wolves growled, the firelight danced across stone and ice, and the fortress itself seemed to come alive, responding to the bond between the alpha and his mate. The battle was fierce, but coordinated. Kale fought with precision and power, while Elara moved with instinct and courage, guided by the mark and the connection that bound them. Each strike, each movement, was part of a greater rhythm, a harmony of strength and destiny. Slowly the shadows weakened, the curse retreating before the unity of two souls aligned. When the last of the darkness dissolved, silence returned. The snowstorm outside had ceased, leaving the mountains bathed in pale moonlight. Elara and Kale stood together, hands still entwined, their breaths mingling in the cold air. The mark on her arm had faded, leaving only a faint glow, a reminder of the trials they had faced and the bond they had forged. Kale turned to her, eyes filled with pride and affection. "You have done what few could. You have faced death, betrayal, and the curse itself, and you have emerged stronger. You are no longer just my mate. You are my equal, my partner, my strength." Elara felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sense of triumph and belonging. She had survived the snow, the betrayal, and the curse. She had found love, trust, and purpose in the most unlikely place. And she knew, deep in her heart, that whatever storms lay ahead, they would face them together. As they stood on the balcony once more, overlooking the mountains now calm and silver under the moonlight, Kale whispered, "The world may test us again. Darkness may rise. But as long as we are together, no force can break us." Alara squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth, the strength, and the love that had grown between them. "Then let them come," she said, her voice steady and full of resolve. "We are ready." And in that quiet, snowy night, the Alpha King and his mate stood united, their bond unbreakable, their hearts aligned, ready to face whatever destiny had in store. The storm had passed, but their story, one of courage, love, and redemption, was only beginning.